When we advertise when we introduce our bill, we then post the advertisements for public hearings based on what we decide tonight. We can decide whatever.
No,
We
you're right.
can
It could be
regulate.
advertised, it would be advertised before the.
Right.
Okay,
And then we
that's
get
correct.
public, right, then we have public comments and et cetera before, this doesn't pass the bill, this introduces the bill.
You're correct.
Right.
Except you're offering as an amendment, but it's
Right.
a substitute bill.
Mr. Mitchell, would it be inappropriate for the chair to recognize this amendment as out of order? Never had to do that ever. I'm just curious. And I do this not from my personal perspective, but as similar to what you just said, the public has not had a chance to vet this at all.
Well, but Mr. McCain is right. The advertisement would follow. I didn't mean it that way. I meant that the bills are out there. A lot of people know what are in them. Everybody on the council knows before. They could have talked to anybody up till now. But this hit my email at 4:19 today. I didn't see it until about 25 minutes later. So,
It in no way, I think, truly represents the intent of the original bill at all.
I don't
see
know,
many conflicts in that.
how can you say it doesn't represent the intent when it's essentially addressing the two? The council voted, I think Mr. Holloway stated a minute ago, 6-1 for a prohibition.
A lot of comments I have in here, such as referencing the fact that it's harmful health and well-being effects from the odor and other emissions released. To me, that line in itself conflicts directly with the Right to Farm Act. And that's only one small piece. And I don't want to dissect a bill that I haven't reviewed and the public hasn't reviewed. And I think if the public knew of all the particulars in this bill, we'd probably have to be in the Civic Center instead of here. So I have to ask that again, if I have the privilege as the chair to consider the amendment out of order because it is such a egregious change from what we have on the table.
but can I ask, what is the standard for when a legislative bill must be presented to the council how far in advance of the hearing, of the meeting, I mean? Do you have that?
Repeat the question.
You were submitting a bill for consideration on the legislative session. Is there a deadline as to how far in advance it has to be submitted?
We would include it in the brief book, which is approximately 1 week prior.
It requires public hearings, it requires advertising, so.
But
But
the bill's
public
right about
hearings
that.
come
That's
after
later.
Once we introduce something, we could introduce a bill, we could introduce something tonight that's not on any agenda.
Yes, you could.
Right. I mean, somebody could make a motion to introduce something on dog laws tonight. And-
That's kind of what I'm saying, is you're introducing a substitute rather than an amendment.
I still consider it an amendment, as Mr. Wilbur says, it's substantial.
It's a very substantial amendment. The
In some ways-
definitions are different. You've added the closed system. That's a whole new concept that's being put into the legislation. Another possibility would be, do you want to introduce this as a fourth option, a separate bill?
Rescue me, no. I think what should be done with this, it should be, Councilman McCain and whoever else should review this, sort of break out the parts of it that they feel are specifically different from the original bill. They want to present that in a work session, or when this bill goes for a final vote, I would be willing to accept that. But this is, I think, is an inappropriate time to try to put this much information in front of this council to make a decision on numerous items that we haven't had the chance to review and the public hasn't had a chance to review. The appropriate time for this will be in the next meeting, either through a work session or when we actually vote on the bill itself.
Well, I guess I'll make one comment. At the end of the day, we want to get this right. And, if it takes longer, and I know, I can't believe I'm saying this, because as Councilwoman Ackley said, we've had this for 3.5 years, but if that means we need to spend more time with it, we spend more time with it. At the end of the day, this council needs to be the council to make this decision, because we've had it in our lap since kind of when we all started. We certainly don't want to be passing this to the next council, which from that respect, we still have time. We're not out of time. I am a little concerned because I am out of town at the next meeting, But if we took it up in October, when we did our advertising, I don't know, like I said, I don't want to push it.
Yeah, if something was introduced tonight, we then require 2 weeks' worth of advertising. So we would have to have the public hearing on October the 4th.
So it would not be the next meeting where any of these would come.
Not for a public hearing or for a vote. You can certainly have discussion on it on September the 20th if council would like.
I don't know. I mean, you can make a motion, Robert Rules of Order allows you to make a motion, which we've done that. It's still on the table, the motion.
That's why I deferred to legal, because it's a matter of context as to whether this is an amendment or whether this is an entirely new bill. It's not an amendment.
It's
Mr. McCain could,
very substantial.
Mr. McCain could withdraw this and work this into the other one if he wanted to at some point in time.
You want to withdraw it, and then we can bring it to the table at another time?
But if you want my preference is, the fact that tonight is an introduction. So whatever we introduce can be amended. It has to be publicized. There has to be public hearings. In some ways, I feel we're getting ourselves ahead of ourselves a little bit. The introduction is merely putting something on the table. Like, if we want to put this on the table, which, number one, I think is a good working document for us to be discussing, and if that's what gets proposed and that's what gets advertised, like I say, that's what happens at the next meeting, that's when the public gets their opportunity for the public hearing will be on the 4th, because it takes 2 weeks to advertise it. And then on the 4th, they give their public comments. And that's really our big discussion, is that meeting on the 4th. And we can, you can make amendments can be made then, changes can be made then. We'll have a work session in between there. So, the public will have their chance to weigh in. So, there's a lot goes on between now before we adopt anything. So I'd rather see us keep moving forward, to be frank.
You're asking the council to vote on 4 pages that we haven't even read.
Well, it's 5, including the
5
signatory
including the
page.
signature page that we haven't read, and that legal hasn't even told us whether it's even illegal or not.
Have we gotten an answer? Can we do this?
We answered that a while ago.
I didn't hear a direct answer.
I think my best answer is make it a separate piece, make it a 4th piece of legislation.
So with that said, can that be done tonight?
No, because it wasn't on the agenda.
It wasn't at all.
And that's where I'm
This
going.
has just hit the table tonight.
Well, that's totally different. Mr. Mitchell just said we can make a motion on anything we want to make a motion on.
Not once you're in the middle of the meeting, you've begun the legislative process. You just can't introduce a legislative bill ahead of time. Maybe if you want to introduce a legislative bill at the beginning of the meeting before we get engaged in the meeting and approve the minutes, et cetera. But you can't do it while we're in the middle of the meeting. You just can't throw a legislative bill out there and say, I'd like to have this done.
Actually, that's not correct.
That is correct. That is correct.
A substitute motion is permitted by Robert Rules of Order, which is
Actually,
on the
we've
table.
never adopted Robert's Rules of Order.
Right, but I'm just saying, that's our, I know we don't
Yeah,
legally adopt that, but we can do it.
Yeah.
Mr. President, it's up to you.
I'm going to consider the amendment out of order. I don't think it's, I have a responsibility as well, and I think this is in violation of all the ethics of the council and the charter, our political procedure, the legislative process. I just don't see where it fits. We have 2 legal opinions here, one from Mr. Wilburn, one from Mr. Mitchell. Both of them are saying this is a little bit beyond the pale, and I understand that, but I think I have to consider this amendment to be out of order. And I certainly would welcome you to try to fine tune this and bring it back in the form of with a work session or something else in the future, but I think we have to do that.
If we don't decide on another route
Right,
to
well,
go
I think we
tonight.
need to continue on with it, with where we are. And Bill, sorry, I just feel like if that's the call I have to make, that's the call I have to make.
Well, I'll appeal that
I get it.
decision then.
I get it. We got a legal team here. Both of them had said that this is pretty much out of order.
Did either one of you say this is out of order?
I think it should be a separate piece of legislation.
Right, but you didn't say
Yes.
it's out of order. Mr. Gannon's saying
I think it's inappropriate as an amendment.
In other words, I'm going to make a call to accept it or not accept it. I'm going to make a call that I can't accept it as an amendment. It is not an amendment. And Bill, you and I have both been doing this for years, and this is something well beyond anything I've ever experienced in my
Well, I don't know, we've made some pretty substantial amendments, like, my gosh, Congress does this all the time, but this is,
we see the shape there.
it's just, I think we're making a lot more out of it than what it is. I mean,
You'll be able to-
you have to get it all in the record, but.
You'll be able to bring it back in a work session, or you'll be able to bring it back in the final bill when we vote on the final bill, whether it's this bill or
It'd be
it
the
could
same,
be other
it'd be
ones.
the same thing.
We don't really want to follow what Congress does, do we?
Mr. McKenzie, could you continue on, please, with what you have as, and Mr. Hawley was suggesting that we should review where we are with this?
Well, before he starts, I gotta
Yes.
say, what's in this says that, from the setbacks and so forth, you just simply follow what I-2 already says.
Excuse me?
You just follow what I-2 already says in this. It's much simpler than,
I haven't read it.
do that.
I haven't read it.
Well, John, read it. We read it to you.
Yeah, but isn't that also requiring a closed top?
Yes.
Okay, so that's pretty substantial difference. That's why the setbacks work there.
Right, exactly. Right.
We're still under discussion, with the initial first introduction of the first piece of legislation, Legislative Bill 2022-10. Mr. McKenzie, thank you for being here tonight. If you could give us an overview. Thank you.
Well, first I'd like to discuss, as I understand it, your first discussion was whether to prohibit these or not. And now we're going to talk about what I've prepared for you tonight is whether this should go in an I-2 zoning district, and then follow that up with an A1 discussion.
For the public's benefit, I think it's important for the council to know what the other options are, and for the public to know what the other options are that we're looking at, so that we're not being very myopic about one decision or another. You need to see the broad picture, the broad scope in order to make a decision.
Well,
Wait. You're talking about order. I mean, we have a bill. The brief book has, the bills are separate bills.
Yes.
And
What
the
I
first
think-
one's been introduced.
What Joe, and I get it, and we're under discussion on the first bill. What Joe is saying is that he would like to see Mr. McKenzie's presentation, because what Mr. McKenzie might have to say about the I-2 or the A1 district is very relevant to him or to any of the rest of us as to how we may decide to vote on this bill. So it is relevant. Thank you, Frank.
Well, as has been discussed initially, there was some discussion as to whether to allow this to occur in the I-2 heavy industrial zoning district. The map that you can see now up on the screen shows that the county boundary and the areas in purple are the heavy industrial zoning districts. Now, the next step in this, there were a series of restrictions that were suggested as to how this might be allowed to occur in these zoning districts. And I'll walk through these things individually and then show you the cumulative impact if you were to put all these restrictions, on a piece of property at one time. So the first comment on this in the industrial is they wanted a 200-foot setback from the property lines. So we took the parcels and were able to do some analysis to show what a 200-foot setback would look on every parcel within the industrial zoning district. The area you see in green is the area that's outside the 200-foot setback.
Is that 200 foot the standard for heavy industrial? What is the standard in the I-2?
Now, that's a question I cannot answer. I was just going by what was in the suggested for the,
One of the proposals is, just going by the standard I-2 zoning setbacks.
I think Frank is going by what's been introduced in the legislative bill.
I was asked to analyze what was proposed in the bill, whether that's in compliance or conformance with the existing zoning code. I'm not familiar with that. So in this case, this is an area up Route 13, west of Route 13 North, the North Industrial Park. There's an area that goes out to Brick Hill Road, to landfill. There's an area just outside of Salisbury, I think near the Armory. There's an area that's a Con Diesel over here. This area over here to the east is the Purdue Farms property. Along Marine Road, along the river, there's an industrial area there. There's a small area that's outside of the 200-foot where something could be built. And then in the southern part of the county, this is down across from how sweet it is. There's several parcels there that have some land available for this 200-foot setback. So that's the first go-around. The next part of this is, okay, there were a series of overlays that they wanted to consider. I'll go through one by one individually and then come back and show you, the cumulative impact. So the first was, if there's residential buildings in the area, they wanted a 400-foot setback from them. So the way this is going to play out is, what I'm showing you is it's going to black out the area. So these areas are no longer in consideration based on this 400.
The areas in black right now are those residential developments?
This is individual homes. So this is a buffer, an individual dwelling unit, residential.
Frank, you said 400, but that would actually be an additional 400, additional to the 200.
So is that going to be a 600-foot?
That's right.
I think it's written wrong in the language.
I had a hard time trying to figure out.
Which is the whole reason for the amendments, right? It's written wrong in the language.
I picked that up. Yeah,
Go ahead.
What do you mean? You mean you don't think it says what I just said?
yeah, I think it's only supposed to be 400-foot setback, not the way that it's written in
Well,
here as an additional.
That may just be a misunderstanding, but it's written as an additional 400, and that was done intentionally. I mean, maybe the council doesn't want that, but
The analysis I performed considered this as an alternative to the 200-foot. So you could also have a 400-foot setback. When I was looking at this, I thought about the 600 feet, but I ended up that I thought this was a 400-foot setback.
Go ahead and follow through.
600 feet would be substantially bigger for all of these areas I'm getting ready to show you.
And I think the county standard is actually 45 feet, I think. I think that's what it is. I'm looking at the zoning code. It varies from 25 to 45.
I know there's different
Just
setbacks for the front, the side, the rear.
Yeah, right. Same from 25 to 45.
There was also a recommendation to be back 400 foot from a school. So if there's a school constructed or built near an industrial area, then that would have an impact. So there is something, Pemberton School is near Marine Road. East Salisbury School is over here near the Con Diesel. There was a recommendation of a 400-foot setback from nursing homes. The Wicomico nursing home is up here on Booth Street, near the area that's Armory. But I don't think there's any other nursing homes that are near the industrial areas. There is a 400-foot setback from mobile home parks. And I don't believe there were any mobile home, well, there's one up here near Delmar. There's also a recommendation of a 400-foot setback from major subdivisions of 10 lots or more. So in this, here you can see this is up north near Delmar. And I've given some subdivision names to kind of give it some bearings. So you can see this is Foxwood, Wood Creek, Ellergood, Breckenridge, Cedar Ridge, Oak Haven. These are all areas, subdivisions, that are larger subdivisions that are near, that would have an impact causing a reduction in the area for your zoning uses. Westover Hills, over near the Wicomico Nursing Home. There's areas down here on Marine Road. Moss Hill Acres, Hillside Park. There's another area that was discussed, and this is the Paleo Channel. So this is an area that runs through the city of Salisbury, over towards, even goes out to Mardella. There's a small area in the south part of this industrial area that's over the Paleo Channel. And this was an area that where they said it should not be over the Paleo Channel. They also said the Chesapeake Bay critical area. The only area that impacted the industrial areas is the area along Marine Road. The critical area pretty much wiped out everything on Marine Road as being available for anything to be built there.
I mean, that was basically wiped out anyhow, except for that one little,
Yeah, it wasn't much there.
yeah, we only started with a slither.
Okay, the next, there was tidal wetlands. So in this case, there's a tidal wetlands 1,000-foot buffer, which is very similar to the Chesapeake Bay critical area boundary. There's also a stream buffer. Now the streams, you look at this, these are what they call intermittent and perennial streams. These are throughout the entire county. These are mapped on the USGA quad maps, and these have been recognized by the county as something worthy of protecting. There are their own setbacks from those streams, especially near the critical area. But you can see the 1,000-foot buffer from those streams is significant. Another area they wanted to look at was the Pda ditches. So the Pda ditches are Public Drainage Association ditches. These are areas in the county where the county has organized a group of associations that will try to keep their ditches clean so the farms can drain. So it also benefits landowners for residential development, controlling stormwater. This is something that landowners pay yearly on their tax bill. It's a small amount for residentials, but it's an important feature that they thought that they should be protected.
Can you move that down just a little bit, Frank? Just so I can see like the whole, or it goes up to Mardella and Hebron.
So most of the tax ditches are in the Willards, Pittsfield area. Okay, the next one is the floodplain. There's a 1,000-foot buffer from the floodplain. And let me turn off these subdivision names. So, you know, a lot of areas in the southwest part of the county, Nanticoke, Tyaskin, Whitehaven, but also through the city of Salisbury, there's lots of area of floodplain, as well as when you get up north. Here you go, the floodplain goes up to Leonard's Mill Park. There's areas over there. The biggest and most impactful is the non-tidal wetlands. Now, the non-tidal wetlands data we have is basically guidance maps, guidance data. But we use this data. It's countywide. The state of Maryland produced the boundaries of the non-tidal wetlands. But you'll see that we have significant areas of non-tidal wetlands, and when you throw a 1,000-foot buffer on it, it controls a large part of the county. So what I'll do now is I'll go back and turn all these layers on and see what has survived these different layers as we go through it.
Frank, hold on. What would you say the amount of property with all those layers put back on that map in the industrial area would be available for a DAF tank? 10 acres, 20 acres, 50 acres?
Well, when it starts, the industrial area, there are 66 parcels that met the 200-foot setback. And of that, there were 588 acres of area that could be developed. Now, when you start throwing these layers on, everything gets reduced. So,
So what's the total, when you put all the layers on, what's left acreage?
I think he's getting ready to show you that.
Oh,
yeah.
I was waiting for him to tell me.
For the,
Spoiler alert, there are 13 parcels that make it through the cut for a total of 56 acres
Okay.
in the industrial area. But I'll walk through each of these layers.
and for the record, though, these were all suggestions that the public sent forward to council and to legal, and Ms. Hurley, to then put them all together as something to be considered. So just to be clear on that.
And your non-title one that you did at the end was the one that dramatically changed your acreage.
That was the biggest impact
Right.
of this as well as the agricultural rural consideration. But I'll turn all these on individually. You'll see a nursing home, mobile home park, major subdivisions, paleo channel, critical area, tidal wetlands, stream, 1,000-foot buffer, Pda ditches, and floodplain. So you can see the areas you see in green are the areas that's left. This is where you can build a tank. And this ends up, there's 13 parcels that made it through, these layers. Some of them are as small as this. On the map over here, I've given a breakdown of each area. Some of them are as small as, 0.08 of an acre. But some of them are substantial. The largest area is 11.31 acres. The smallest is 0.08 acres. For a total of 56, plus or minus. And there's 13 areas that made it through. So now, that's the industrial summary. Would you like me to go through the agricultural?
Good, Frank.
Hey, Frank, how easy is it for you to change a parameter? Like where you have the setback to 200. If you put 50 in, for example, are you able to just do that and it'll show it right away, or is that something
Well, I can do it.
take you?
You don't want to do it on the fly here, but it can be done if you give me a list of what setbacks you want to reconsider.
Right.
Then-
I didn't know if it was something, it's a click of a, it's going to show it right away, but
There is magic, but it's not that
not
magic.
that magic.
Yeah. For the A1 area, the agricultural resource, there were 154 parcels, that made it through the cut. Now, one of the first things we had to do with that was they wanted a 1,000-foot setback from the property line. So that kicks it up a level to pretty much the smallest farm that would qualify was 100 acres. So you needed 100 acres to even get started with this, with a 1,000-foot setback. But with that, as I mentioned, there were 154 areas, that could make it through that 1,000-foot setback for a total of 2,805 acres. Now, when we went through the process, what I just did before, and I'll give you another spoiler alert, we ended up with 7 parcels that made it through all the environmental layers for a total of 39.54 acres in the ag area. So, and I'll go through and show you, how that was done. Start with the critical area. So, and a lot of these are the same layers that we just went through, with the exception of the agricultural They also included the rural legacy area, which is not included in the industrial area. I don't know if that was intentional, but it was not in the list I saw.
Say it again.
The rural legacy area was included in the agricultural setback restriction, but that was not included in the industrial.
I don't think any of the rural legacies in the industrial, is it?
That's why I didn't.
No, but it was just
Right.
it was just consideration. Well, I was trying to compare the apples to the apples. And wetlands. Now, I'll show you what the difference is
There's chairs back there.
when you look at a tidal wetland. So that is the limits of the tidal wetland. When you add a 1,000-foot buffer, you'll see what that buffer does. So that increases the land significantly. Streams. Same thing. This is the streams, and those are the actual streams, and then here's the stream's 1,000-foot buffer. The Pda ditches. And here, when you add the 1,000-foot buffer, that's the impact. Floodplain. Floodplain 1,000-foot buffer. The Paleo channel did not have a buffer. It was just the footprint of the Paleo channel. This area in gray you see is the city of Salisbury corporate limits. These regulations that I have any authority within any municipalities in the city, so that's taken out. Rural legacy area. This is 35,000 acres around Hebron, Quantico Creek. Okay, then we've got the non-tidal wetlands, and you can see how small they are. But then when you add the 1,000-foot buffer, it really shows the impact of that buffer. So now I'll go through and turn on all the layers. So when all's said and done, as mentioned, I think there's 7 areas that made the cut. There are a couple up near Sharptown. We're talking slivers here. There's something there. So once again, the green areas are areas that where they can build, these tanks. And you'll notice that this is 1,000 foot from this property line to here. So this is after the 1,000-foot setback. A few seconds for this to get going here. They're hard to spot, at this scale. And I think the fact that we've only got, 40 acres in the entire county, is indicative of what impact this legislation would have.
You took out the non-tidal wetland. What does that look like?
Took out the wetland and the wetland buffers.
I was just going with the 1,000-foot setback from the non-tidal wetland.
So here's the non-tidal wetlands. So are there any questions on this or any methodology or?
you be able to circle, like with magic marker, something on the map that you have there of the areas? That is, what is that final draft over there on the far end? Is that the final picture of everything? With all the restrictions in place?
Okay, yeah, this is, instead of showing it black, I just show the areas that are allowed and try to highlight them and give an acreage figure of those properties where something could be built.
Do you have like a magic marker where you can circle those areas that are left open so that the people here can at least see where these proposed areas would be?
I might want to show you better on here. I can turn off all the layers
All right.
so you can see it.
The only thing is that it gets really small and it's, go ahead. You have the magic marker, Josh?
So
Now, what this is showing, though, this is showing initially, when I turn off all those layers, this is the initial 154 parcels. But there's one parcel here. So you're right. I'll
Yeah,
sketch
let's
it
circle
over.
them over here. So that way we can see the whole context of how it fits into the county as a whole.
So there's 3.5 acres up here. In the dark green is the area that's allowed to build. In the lighter green is the parcel that this sits upon. This is west of Mardella, 4.64 acres. This is up near the northeast of Mardella, 1.83 acres. There's an area down here that looks to be Shelton Farmer. This area here is 16.78 acres. It looks to be the area where the Board of Winery is. Not sure that's where it is now. There's an area over here, looks like it's south of North Crossing, 1.5 acres. This is near Whiten now, 3.24 acres. And here's something that's south of Pittsfield, 9.94 acres. This is a total of 39.54 acres countywide.
So what we're looking at here, thank you, Frank. What we're looking at here is from the three bills that we have, of course, they're all interrelated in the fact that one could very well make a decision plus or minus as to how you may vote on another. We're looking at banning, which is where we're trying to get a legal opinion on that. I think we did get a legal opinion on that. We're looking at the I-2 district, which Mr. McKenzie has shown us what areas would be feasible, and we've looked at the A1 district as far as what our options might be there, to give you an idea of what you might feel the most comfortable with. We are still in the motion and for the legislative bill 2022-10 on the DAF prohibition. So we will continue with that discussion here for comments.
Process question, I guess, are we going to introduce all three of these tonight and then discuss in work session, or just try to introduce only one and move
I
forward?
think we're trying to come to some sense of finality here where we can have one to move forward with.
Well, I mean, from what we just saw, I mean, what it's telling me is Wicomico County is a terrible county to have DAF tanks. I mean, the impact, anywhere you put a tank, it's either, the only way to increase that area would be if you wanted to reduce your size on non-tidal wetlands, which would increase your rate. I mean, is your objective trying to create as much land as you can for DAF storage, or, but what this is showing, what Frank just demonstrated is, we have a tremendous amount of tidal wetlands, non-tidal wetlands, stream buffers. Many of these we have to meet anyhow. In our conservation areas like the rural legacy. So, the impact, anywhere you try to put one, you're having to deal with issues. It's simply why Wicomico is not a good candidate.
I think what I would say is that what we're trying to do here is in my opinion, we're trying to come up with some type of a reasonable compromise. It's what we've always done, whether it was dealing with downzoning in the agricultural district, which you remember, Bill, whether it's the poultry industry and the poultry houses, which we were faced with a few years back. I think we're trying to do something where we can find a compromise that will work for both. We don't want to compromise an industry necessarily, but we certainly don't want to subject neighborhoods to the type of issues and the problems that have come before us. And I think it's more than obvious as to what's come before us over the last 3 years. So
A couple of minutes ago, John just presented a compromise that affects both of those.
I think your compromise on a total ban does not do that. It's isolate. It only goes into one direction. It isolates the entire process and eliminates them entirely. I'm looking for a compromise where we can isolate it, where they are definitely in areas that will not compromise the neighborhoods or the people who are currently living here, and yet still workable for the industry. If there are places where we can do it, where it will not have a negative impact on the community and on the county, why not do that? I don't see where the I-2, I think, is probably the worst decision we could make. It borders schools, it borders residential developments, it borders it borders Delmar, it borders Salisbury, and it borders Fruitland, and it borders the Henry Parker complex.
So say your A1 doesn't border any schools?
Let me finish. And one of those is actually surrounded by a designated growth area. So, we need to know what we're doing there. So
Hey, Frank, how many schools are bordered by an A1?
Excuse me.
It's going to be hard for you to answer that because how many subdivisions
How many schools,
are bordered by
the areas
A1?
that you've chosen after we put in the text amendments, how many schools border those areas?
I noticed 2 in the industrial. I didn't see any in the 1,000-foot agricultural areas.
So that's really what I'm getting at. Any other discussion?
But I-2 allows for, we can do landfills, we can do heavy manufacturing. That's what it's for. It's heavy industrial.
I think the
But
locations.
you're saying, but it's bad but DAF is too bad for heavy, our lowest, I guess one way to describe it, our lowest form of zoning in terms of the most impactful uses.
If you look at where the I-2 is, I have never had a part in that, and I would never take part in that. To put an I-2, who would put an I-2 in the middle of a designated growth area? This should all be revamped. I don't like any part of it. Josh?
Which is a good question. Did I hear you say, Frank, that Purdue is located in I-2?
Yes, Purdue is a heavy industrial area. Now, there's Purdue also in the city of Salisbury, but this doesn't have anything to do with that. But the area out there on
Right.
West Zion Road, or Zion Church.
I think just so it said, the obvious challenge here also is there's just, we are the largest county on the Eastern Shore by population, and that's only going to get worse. I think that's the biggest challenge is, I think a lot of folks probably are looking at this in the audience and are surprised how much our industrial area touches our residential area, but that's just because we have 106,000 people that live here. 180,000 people come in on a daily basis to work in here in total population in here. So
I'm not in favor of putting in the industrial zone either. And as far as, it needs to be moved to ag, because it is ag. They're putting this product on fields. They're using it to grow crops with. It's ag. It's simple. Some people's called it waste. Anybody can have that opinion if they want, but it's a waste product that people want. Heard somebody say the other day, you know, bark off a tree is waste to the lumber mill, but to other people, it's a product. You know, the shavings from a sawmill is waste. Excuse me. The shavings from a sawmill to the sawmill is waste until they sell it to somebody to put inside the chicken house. So it's waste, okay? You can designate it as waste, but it's waste that people want. Now, the reason there's a lot of people in this room tonight, okay? It's been going on for 3 years, okay, 3.5 years. We understand why the folks over on the west side are upset because of the odor. They're not happy about it being there. But we've experienced in the past the environmental community going after the poultry business. And that's the fear that we have right now, is the environmental community going after the poultry business. If this goes, if we ban these tanks, and we need to restrict them some, and we need to set buffers, and we need to have setbacks. I understand all that. But the fear in this room right now amongst the poultry companies, amongst the growers, is they're next. And I've been here long enough to see that that's how it works. So, and I remember in 2016, I seen somebody shaking their head on the back row. I remember in 2016, some of the people that's come forward right now and saying they don't want DAF, these DAF tanks, standing up here and defending the poultry industry back then. They were defending it, okay? Now, constantly, I represent a large part of the rural area in Wicomico County. Constantly, we get complaints. I won't say every day, I won't say every week, but about truck traffic on Dagsboro, Bob Smith, Rum Ridge, Zion Road. You know, people wanting to know why there's so many trucks. You know, hey, it's our economy. You know, that's why we have so many trucks. You know, we'll get complaints about poultry manure. We'll get complaints about chicken houses. You know, when we were going through the legislation in 2016, the opponents even did photoshops of chicken houses and set them on the edges of a ball field to make it look like they were building chicken houses on the edges of a school ball field. They went that far, you know. In this situation here, last week, I get a Google picture of my house. Don't bother me, I know what my house looks like. But I got a Google picture from a gentleman, and he drew circles around it with DAF tanks all the way around my house. You know, I know what my house looks like. There's no privacy with Google anymore. But I can tell you something. This past weekend, I get complaints from a lady complaining about farmers spraying for worms or moss on soybeans. Where does it stop? Where does this stop? So we've got to protect the farmer. Now, that's what we're up here to do. And banning DAF tanks is not going to be the solution to this. So, anyway.
I'm concerned that banning the DAF tanks is this, and I'd like to go to legal when you're talking about these type of issues. Banning the DAF tanks is pretty much considered legally indefensible. Mr. Wilbur has stated that the A2 district is the easiest choice to defend. I think the goal here is to try to be good neighbors, period, and try to resolve the issues that are concerning the people who are in this room tonight and the people who we've been listening to for the last 3 years. I think with what Mr. McKenzie has said, I-2, you can't do I-2. I mean, it borders schools, it borders municipalities, it borders neighborhoods. Not going to work. Those people are going to be in a worse situation than many of you are in here if that were to happen. So I think that's not an option. The A1 district, what I like about the A1 district is it does isolate them. It removes them from neighborhoods such as each and every one of yours, and it puts it out there where it's not going to cause a problem with the neighbors, and yet at the same time it can help maintain a viable industry, because we all live in, you know, for the most part, poultry and agriculture is the industry in Wicomico County in the Eastern Shore. So I think we're looking at a compromise. Not maybe a 100% solution, but I'm looking for some type of compromise where it isolates them, and it keeps them out of the neighborhoods. And I think if you look at those areas, I think that is what that accomplishes.
For me,
Okay, I'll add on to that a little bit, what John just said about our industry. I got some surprising numbers today. Mount Air and Purdue, there's 2,300 people that live in Wicomico County and work for those two companies. Okay. What was interesting is we've heard so many times about Purdue doesn't use DAF, Mount Air does. There's twice as many Mount Air farms in Wicomico County than there is Purdue farms, if the numbers that were supplied to me were correct. So you're right, it's an important industry to Wicomico County. When we first started hearing about this, the folks that were upset about the DAF tank they were upset that they did not get a seat at the table. They did not get their special exception. At planning and zoning, they sent it back to the council with a special exception. And that's what we heard to begin with, special exception. Then other people got involved. And then it started turning to banning. So.
for me, it's, this is becoming more obvious as we go through this, but, Mr. McKenzie's exercise, as I say again, demonstrates that Wicomico County is not a good candidate for DAF tanks, period. And the question for me is, do we do a prohibition? I proposed an amendment that, John, you keep mentioning compromise. It is a compromise, and certainly it would allow the enclosed systems, which is the future of how DAF's going to be handled. So, it makes that very clear for our county. But, if we're not doing a ban, then it's in, you put it in the eye too. I mean, it's a waste product. It's brought here. It's not created on the farm. It's trucked here to be stored, and that is that's what that is what our I-2 is for. And that these comments that, like, for some reason, some of the comments are, well, you put an A1, it's not going to be next to your neighborhood. How many people out there live in the A1 district right now, and it's not going to be next to your neighborhood? We don't have neighborhoods in A1. We have, that's where most of our neighborhoods actually are.
Bill, we're talking about the A1s with the text amendments, which is the map that.
Right, and we're talking about the I-2 with the
That's what
text
we're voting
amendments.
on. That's what
Right.
we're voting
And we're talking about the I-2 with the text amendments. I just find it absurd that we think, oh, we can't put DAF in the I-2, it'd be too close to a neighborhood. But we can do a landfill, that's permitted. We can do heavy industrial plants, that's permitted, that's okay. It's like, what? That just doesn't make any sense. So, the question is either, is it a prohibition, or do we place it in the I-2 with restrictions? And we can talk about the restrictions. One minor change in those restrictions, double that acreage real quick in that I-2.
Any discussion? Josh?
I'm going to say exactly what I think we should do, which is maybe not normal, but having listened to, let me back up and say, first of all, I grew up on a farm. I grew up in the chicken house, working a lot of time there. I work in the industry, generally work in conservation and agriculture industry. I want to see healthy agriculture. Having, our Farm Bureau speak out to say that this is not something that they want, because they don't want to be known as bad actors. The farmers in the county want to do the right nutrient management. They have nutrient plans. They follow the nutrient management plans. They want to be known as good actors and good neighbors. So, simultaneously, what we also have, we have a product, DAF, that essentially that we don't want to limit. Obviously, we can't limit. We do not have the authority to limit the application on any of our fields in the county, any farmers. We could not do that if we wanted to. So if we still want DAF to be an available product, if we still want that to be an available product, but we don't want all the negatives that come along with it, then it kind of limits it to one of a few things. So I think the best path forward, as much as I've, for the past year and a half, I've been putting together here's things that I've heard from the community. Here's where we should, limit here, what all potential ways that we should consider. I think, given this exercise and looking how hard it is to get this in the county and how much others would be impacted in Wicomico, I think the only way that we move forward would be to limit no open tanks like the ones that are currently in existence. They stay in the current tanks. Not going to touch them. There'll be they'll be grandfathered in the process. Going forward, that we basically then say, if we want to bring Daphne to the county, that's fine. You can apply it. You can bring it from outside the county. You can apply it to your fields if you're a farmer, but it's not going to be stored here. It can then still be applied and used as a soil amendment. And then if you do still want to bring it in, then we do it through anaerobic digestion. And in that, it is a closed system that, doesn't come with all the other issues of the flies and the smells and all the things that we've been hearing back, all of the pictures we've received, all of the stories that we've heard, and not just from a handful of folks, but from, 50 plus neighbors in and around. Adding on the 50 neighbors plus our county farm bureau saying that they don't think this is something that that is appropriate, then the only way that I then still see as a path forward to be able to fix the issues that have been brought up is through putting it into some sort of closed system, still allowing it, or then just allowing it to come in. If they want to bring it in on fields, that's fine. So I don't see, I don't think we should have a quote unquote ban, as the word's been thrown around, but if we allow it to be brought in from the county, still used on fields, that's not a ban. If we allow it to be brought into the county to use in anaerobic digestion or a closed system process, that's not a ban. That still can happen here. So I don't know of any other way that we can do this. And I've racked my brain. I've spent, I don't know how many hours we've spent trying to think through this. So that's where I'm at. And that's where I think we should generally move forward. I don't, am I worried about setting a precedent for other counties? Well, yeah. Obviously this is an issue that has harmed a lot of people and has been, has been brought up many times as being something that's really, really rough for those folks to deal with. And they're standing in the hallway. I can see all the folks who, the same farmers I grew up with. So I think going forward, after thinking through this and racking my brain, I think the only way that we can do this is to no ban, but to allow it to be brought in. But we do not allow then any more storage tanks to be built to hold a DAF-like product, if not DAF. And I'm sure we can come up with better amendments as far as how to define that. But otherwise, it would still be allowed to be brought in from other counties to be applied. Land application, we can't do anything about that. And then it would still be allowed to be brought in for a closed system anaerobic digestion. Thank you.
Any comments?
We weren't voting on applying application anyway, Josh. We're voting on.
No, we can't do that. That's state law.
So,
Right.
that's, that's not what we were voting on.
I'm just being clear that it could still be brought in to the county to be applied. If someone really wanted, if it's anything for the chemical fertilizer or any other kind of thing, if you want to be able to bring it into the county, it's just fine. That's accepted. But as far as the storage here, that's what our citizens have had the biggest issue with. So I say, there's no ban. You can allow it to be brought in, used on your land.
Yeah, you mentioned setting a precedent for other counties. I'm worried about setting a precedent for Wicomico County. That's what I'm worried about. Because we know that some of the folks, not folks on the west side that's experienced this tank, but some of the folks that's involved in this process is not friendly to poultry. We know that. What's next?
I don't think there's a person in this room that's not friendly to poultry.
Comments?
I want to clarify with Mr. Wilbur, Andrew, any decisions that we make, this will not affect the current tanks, that they will be in place. Okay,
They would be non-conforming uses.
okay.
Yeah, any legally pre-existing non-conforming use continues until, I believe it's 12 months that it's abandoned. So if you shut down for a certain period of time, I might be wrong on the number of months,
Okay.
but
that's
like a
right.
year, then you can't start up again without meeting the then current requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I did like what Josh was saying about the closed tanks, anaerobic digestion without oxygen. That means the neighbors aren't going to smell it. But we're currently talking about Legislative Bill 2210, and that's banning these tanks. Didn't I hear several times that it's not legal to ban these tanks?
That's never been said.
No.
We're still waiting on authority.
Right.
opinion.
I thought Mr. Illuminati sent an email with a little snippet.
We have not gotten to that point. There's, whether it's preempted or not, I have an opinion on, but whether that's, just let me say this, I don't really want to go down this road. I don't agree with the rationale that Mr. Illuminati came up with, but that doesn't mean that he isn't correct about the final decision. I've been researching that. I have not found a knockout punch either way to say it's clearly bannable or it's clearly not. You know, if I were betting on it, I would say you probably have the authority, but it's not clear, and it's inviting a lawsuit probably.
That's why I'm saying that I think the A1 version is the most legally defensible.
Defensible.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, we are voting on Legislative Bill 2022-10, the introduction of Legislative Bill 2022-10. I will do a roll call. Councilwoman Ackley,
Aye.
Councilman Hastings,
Aye.
Councilman McCain,
Aye.
Vice President Davis,
Aye.
Councilman Holloway,
No.
Councilman Dodd.
Aye.
Excuse me? Aye.
That's aye.
Okay, aye. Chair's going to vote no. I go along with legal, and I do think the A2 isolates them where it's not going to bother anybody in this county. So Legislative Bill 2022-10 passes with a vote of 5-2. Okay? Thank you. Mr. McKenzie, thank you for your help on it so far, but we're moving forward still. Go ahead.
So I was just going to clarify, that's 5-2 vote for the introduction. The bill can still be,
Amended.
tweaked as we go through the process.
Correct, thank you. Thanks for that. With the introduction for the public, can you explain the process where it would go from here?
Sure. So the public hearing will be on October the 4th. And then after the public hearing, council will have the opportunity to vote at that meeting. Since the introduction is this evening, we have 60 days to take action. But ideally, it would be October the 4th for the vote, public hearing and vote.
Now, if we just had the public hearing, we don't take a vote, what's the timeline after that?
We have 60 days, and I didn't calculate that, from 60 days from tonight.
60 days from tonight. That's
Correct.
when that decision has to be made. Can the council at any point in time vote to extend the 60 days?
Yes, it can.
By how many?
I believe it's another 60 days, Mr. Wilbur, if I'm correct.
It is.
Okay, just making so the public understands the legislative process. Good.
When is the end of our, I guess, so that everyone understands who's here, we've put in a moratorium years ago, extended it multiple times. We get on very legal shaky ground if we were to continue to, so when does that end?
I would say the moratorium is, the ice is very thin legally under that. I wouldn't worry too much about that at this point.
Okay, that is it. The other items on the agenda, we have the introduction of legislative, entertain a motion to introduce legislative bill number 2022-11. That is the I-2 district. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second? There is not a second. Introduction of legislative bill number 2022-11 fails. Entertain a motion to introduce legislative bill number 2022-12. That is the A1 district. Entertain a motion? There's no motion, no second. The introduction of legislative bill number 2022-12 fails. This time, we open the floor for public comments. If you'd like to have any comments you'd like to make, come to the podium, please. State your name, your county of residence, and your concerns.